Okay, next what we're going to do is this is a little explanation about the Tootsie Pop lab that I want you to try. Okay? In doing this, what you're going to do is you're going to answer a question that you've always probably wanted to do. And what I want you to do is you're going to write up, utilizing the scientific method, all the steps of the scientific method in order to solve a problem. All right. And I'm going to guide you through, and I'll point out at the end what things you got to add to this. But the first piece to the scientific method was the problem. Okay. And in regards to that problem, right, this problem for the Tootsie Pop lab, you probably have heard this before, and that is, how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of a Tootsie Pop? So that's going to be your problem. So you can write that in your note, and that is, how many licks does it take to get to center, or oops, Tootsie Roll center of pop. All right. So that's going to be your first. That's going to be your question that you have to answer. All right. Now, in doing this, you have two ways you can do this. One way, if you have access to be able to get a Tootsie Pop, go get one, and I want you to actually do this at home. All right. If you don't have access or you don't want to go get one, then what you can do is I'm going to give you a number that you're going to use as your data. All right. But we'll get to that in a little bit later. So after the problem in this, the next step was the hypothesis. So for that second step, the hypothesis, in this one, obviously this is going to be an educated guess. Well, I'm assuming that all of you have had candy before. So you know that according to the little cartoon video, the owl, he takes 3 licks and he bites it. So we know it's probably not going to take 3 licks, and we know you probably aren't supposed to bite it. So what I want you to do is I want you to come up with a number. All right? So you're going to have some number as to how many licks you think it's going to take. Now, what if your number was 1,000? All right, that was what your hypothesis was. And you actually do it and you get 1,001. Were you right? No, you were wrong. So you wouldn't be able to accept it. Well, that's kind of hard to be able to guess it right down to the exact lick. What I am going to do is I'm going to give you a 50 lick margin. Which really what it is, it's really 100 licks, because I'm going to say plus or minus 50. Right? So if you said 1,000, and really what you're looking at now is you're really looking between 950 and 1,050. So if you got 1,001, would you be correct? Yes. Okay. So it's within that 50 licks up or below, or above or below the number that you choose. All right. Now again, this is your own choice. Right. Again, it's making an educated guess. Okay. Now don't go through the entire experiment and then write down this number. That's not the idea behind the scientific method. The idea is to take a guess beforehand and then see if you get it right or wrong. On this whole experiment, when we get all done, should I grade you lower if your hypothesis is wrong? No, because the idea was it was a guess. All right, what I'm really looking at is to see, did you do the steps to the scientific method? All right, that's what I'm going to be looking for. So the next step to this is number 3. Let's see. And that's the experiment. And doing the experiment, we got to have a procedure as the first part. And doing this procedure, we got to come up with some agreeing on the idea as to what would be correct in doing this. Well, one thing is you got to lick the Tootsie Pop. So that means you got to lick it like this. You can't put it in your mouth and pull it out. That wouldn't be classified as a lick. That would make it so that people would get different types of results. You can't bite it. So no biting it like the cartoon commercial does. How are we going to know when we get to the end? Well, that'll be when there's no candy covering the Tootsie Pop. Right? So end. Not Tootsie Pop, I'm sorry, Tootsie Roll. So we'll know that we're at the end. when there's no more candy covering the Tootsie Roll part, right? Now, some people always think that the problem was how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? That's not what the problem says, because the center of the Tootsie Pop is the stick. Okay, we're after really the question is how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie Roll center of the Tootsie Pop? That means we're trying to get to that Tootsie Roll that's inside there. So there's a difference. You got to make sure that you identify that, and that's one of the things that happens in science. Is really wording is really, really important. Right? Anything else? Well, let's see. What else should we worry about? Doesn't matter whether it's a big or a small one. I will tell you the amazing piece on that doesn't matter. Right? Whether you use a big one or a small one, you really end up with exactly the same answer, because the big ones and the small ones, the size of that Tootsie Roll in the center is proportional. Because I switched from big to small years ago, and it really gave me exactly the same number. So I've been doing this lab for many, many, many years in class, so I do have a general idea as how many licks it does actually take. So in utilizing these steps, all right, that you got to lick it, you can't bite it. The end is when there's no more candy or the Tootsie Roll. Now, what about how much pressure you put on it? Well, we're going to have to say that that's kind of like average pressure. You can't get like on your tongue, all right? Nor do you want to sit there and go ding, 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 and just barely touch it. You want to just basically lick it like a average lick, okay? So we'll say average lick. All right, so now from there, I think that gives us our procedure as to what we need to do. All right, what comes next? Now you got to collect your data. All right, I'm going to erase this so that I can keep going on this, and we'll keep the problem up there, but we don't need that anymore. All right, so now we need to collect data. So in order to collect the data, the one thing that I'll suggest that you probably do is keep tally marks, where you like put down a mark equals 10 licks. Then you won't end up losing track, so you can like do 10 licks and then mark down one mark, and then do 10 licks and then do another mark. And then when you get all done, we'll get to the fourth step. And the fourth step is the analysis. In order to do the analysis, you're going to put together your data. So on this experiment, all you're going to do is count up how many licks it was. So you're going to end up with the number as to how many licks it took. Okay, so you just add up how many licks it took you to do it. Now again, if you do the experiment, that's great. You'll have a number here that you actually collected the data. When we get all done with this, I will give you another number that you can utilize if you want, if you don't want to actually do this lab, or if you don't have access to a Tootsie Pop. So that's your analysis. Analysis, there is no table or graph or anything for this one. All we're going to do is you're just going to have your total number of licks. Finally, we get to step number 5. That's the conclusion. What do you do in the conclusion? Well, if you remember, according to the notes, you accept or reject your hypothesis. So what you're going to have written down is based on this number, you go back to the hypothesis and say, okay, was I right or was I wrong? Was I within that 50 lick margin, both up or down, or was I not? So all you're going to do is say, yep, I accept my hypothesis, or I reject my hypothesis. And this is where I'm going to be looking to see not whether you reject it or accept it, it's did you do it correct in comparison that number to the original number that you guessed. All right, so if your number was within the right margin, you say accept, you get 100% on this experiment. If your number is not within that margin and you say accept, now you made a mistake because you should have said reject. So if you would have said reject, then you'd get 100%. But because you said accept and it wasn't within that margin, then you would lose a couple points. All right? So this is what what you need to write down in your notebook is you're going to need to write down the stuff that we just talked about up here, those steps, and you need to fill in the last couple things, the analysis and conclusion, and then take a picture of that and send it to me. Oh, my lights just shut off. And then that will be your assignment for this thing. Now, for those of you that don't want to do it, what I want you to utilize as your analysis number is I want you to use 350, all right? So that would be if you're not doing the lab, all right, that would be how many licks you would end up with according to my data, all right? Now, I don't want you to utilize this number. I do want you to make a guess as to what you think it would be, okay, and then get to the end and accept or reject it. All right, with that, make sure that you go do this lab or write up this report and then send me the information.